And I'm going to be very brief, and then I'm going to ask Mr. Sublette to talk about the two documents that we're chatting about. So I'm going to make 4 points. Number one is, when we're entering into the MOU, this is just the beginning of the process. If you were, it'd be like a race, and this is the gun going off. We know what the course is, we know what we're trying to achieve here, but there's a lot of work, including two very structured, formal public meetings that would have to occur that have at least a 30-day notification period prior to the public meeting happening. We project that if we did this as a sprint, this will take about 4 months to get done. We understand that it will probably take 6 months to actually do this. At the end of the day, we want people of this community and certainly this body to feel that they've been fully engaged and understand what the potential benefits and what the potential risks are of any deal. But this is just the start of the process, the MOU. The second point that I want to make is there is no increases in taxes that are associated with this particular project. There is currently a certain amount of taxes that are being paid and have been paid in the area surrounding this area. We are talking about really reallocating and redistributing those taxes from the state to the city on a formula that allows us to increase our financial position fairly substantially. Why is that important? The city already has an obligation of approximately $10.8 million in star bond debts that we are not, at this particular moment, receiving nearly enough revenue stream from to service that debt. And the city is going into its general fund and using general obligation to repay this particular amount of money. So we are in a bad financial condition currently as it pertains to the star bond indebtedness that we have. This solution allows us to not only service the existing debt, but to service the incremental debt that would be associated with that. So if you turn this around, if the city took no action at all, we would be in a substantially worse financial situation than we would be if we were to take the action that's being recommended. We already are there. There's no action that we have to take to continue to be in a highly deficient situation pertaining to the star bond debt. Right now, we believe that by entering into this agreement, that we will generate about $17 million in revenue that will be sufficient to pay off the existing debt and the new debt that will be taken on. We believe that if we do not take this action, we run a very significant risk of even losing a substantial part of the revenues there because we can't predict what would happen to the Heartland Park facility without this action. Not saying it would definitely go down, but it's certainly looking, it is at risk at this particular moment. And we've worked very closely with the state of Kansas, the Department of Commerce, certainly with Mr. Irwin, who's here this evening and will make some comments. And I believe we all agree that we've put together a deal that is in everybody's best interest. At this point, I'll turn it over to Mr. Sublette, who could talk about the specific agreements.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mayor.
Mr. Sublette.
As indicated, I would like to talk about items F and G simultaneously, and I would like to start with the memorandum of understanding. And specifically, the memorandum of understanding, like the city manager stated, this is the first step. If this body would decide they wanted to grant the city manager the authority to enter into the memorandum of understanding, there will be no bonds issued today. There will be no expansion of the Star Bond District. The memorandum of understanding at its base would move to expand the Star Bond District from Southwest Gary Ormsby Road, where Heartland Park is located now, north along Southwest Topeka Boulevard up to Croy. That would be a significant expansion and would allow us to capture the state's portion of the sales tax. This is not an increase in property tax. This is not an increase in sales tax. It just allows the city to benefit from capturing the state's portion of the sales tax. So that's one part of the memorandum of understanding. The second part is we would issue about $4.7 million in new star bonds, and we estimate the total debt service on that to be about $6.3 million. Now, and that would allow us to acquire the property free of encumbrances. And When you add that to our current star bond debt, it comes out to about $17 million. And based on projections, and I want to explain the projections are real dollars that the state worked with us to identify what are the sales tax revenues in this expanded district. And it comes up to a little more than $17 million. So by expanding the district, issuing the new bonds, giving the state a free and clear title to Heartland Park, we will be able to essentially break even and service our debt. The new district is worth right about $9 million, I believe, to the city. Right now, that district, as it's currently configured, 2013 revenues were $165,000. Over 12 years is $1.9 million to service $10.8 million in debt. So you can do those numbers. There is a significant advantage to expanding the star bond district and issuing the new star bonds. It enables the city to gain clear title to the property, allows us to pay off our debt service, allows Mr. Irwin to leave the property, and it's something that I think he's ready to do. And all of the operating costs associated with Heartland Park will be paid by Mr. Irwin pending the star bond transaction. Now, one thing I want to be clear about is kind of what I started with in terms of the workout agreement. There's going to be 17 different steps between now and the completion of the star bond transaction that either this body's going to have to take, or the Secretary of Commerce is going to have to take. The city manager mentioned the public hearings. There's going to be at least 2 public hearings. There's going to be a variety of resolutions and ordinances this body is going to have to pass. They're going to have to adopt the project plan. There are all kinds of steps that need to take place. And I think there may be the feeling that this MOU is the end, and it's really not. It's the beginning. It allows us to continue the conversation, to continue to operate within the framework that's been discussed with all the participating parties. I also wanted to state that we received a letter from the Secretary of Commerce today, which I think has been distributed, so being supportive of the project and moving forward with the project, and other entities have expressed that same desire. So that, in a nutshell, is the memorandum of understanding, which I know has been a public document for some time. And to move on to the second document, which is actually the first document listed on your agenda, the workout agreement. We have navigated a lot of waters with Jayhawk Racing, Mr. Irwin, different creditors, and what the workout agreement is, it would allow Mr. Irwin to continue to operate through February of 2015 until essentially, if this body wants to move forward, we would expand the district and issue new bonds. It would allow Core First to loan an additional $300,000 to Mr. Irwin to allow him to continue to operate. If the star bonds were not issued, then there would be an agreement that a deed would be put in lieu of foreclosure, so Core First wouldn't have to go through the foreclosure procedures. That gives the city an option to redeem that property if there was default by Mr. Irwin, if we chose to do so. Again, it just gives us the option. It doesn't mean that we have to do that. And the workout agreement is dependent on continuing to move forward on the star bonds. So that's a secondary agreement associated with the memorandum of understanding. So again, what's being asked of you tonight is just to allow the city manager to enter into the memorandum of understanding and continue to move forward with the project. And I would stand for any questions.
Are there questions for Mr. Sublette? Councilmember Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to direct these questions at the tag team over here. First question is, currently we have $10.8 million in outstanding star bond debt from the 2005 issuance. Is that correct?
That's what's left. That's what's left owing on those bonds.
That is what's left. And the current star bond district last year generated $165,000. towards that debt, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Which over the 12-year life plan or lifespan, if we continued producing at that rate, would leave us $8.9 million short. Is my math correct on that?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. That $8.9 million would be an obligation that the city has that would come from general funds, property taxes, other general fund sources.
Yes.
Mayor, Councilmember, yes. It would be a city debt.
It would be a city debt. So according to this plan, we would be issuing another $4.7 million in star bond debt, which I think is 6.3 over the life of it, raising our obligation, total obligation to 17 million. The new revenue district, or the new star bond district, as of 2012 was producing 1.4 million. Is that number is also correct?
Yes, Council.
I just want to make sure that all these numbers get out in the public. That 1.4 million, and this is my understanding of how this process works, the star bond process works. That 1.4 million is the difference in the amount of state-derived sales tax or state accrued sales tax in 2012 as opposed to the year 2005 when those bonds were first issued. Correct?
Mayor and Councilmember Schmidt, so two things are occurring there to make that number substantially bigger than the existing number. Number one is the size of the district itself. The boundaries have been increased to take in more properties. And secondly, the trigger mechanism in which establishes where the incremental value begins has been ratcheted back to a 2005 timeframe.
Correct. I'm speaking of the proposed expanded district, in that 1.4 million number is representative of the difference that would have been generated in 2005 and 2012 in the fully expanded district, if it had existed today, or had it existed in 2012, correct?
Mayor, Councilmember, yes.
Okay. And the total amount of revenue derived from a continuation of what we're already producing over the next 12 years would be approximately $17 million, which would retire the full debt obligation that we're considering taking on, correct?
Mayor, Councilmember
We're
Schmitz.
very near it.
Yeah, very near. So we are projecting that there'd be about 120,000 differential.
Okay. So the choice that's being presented here is $8.9 million in general obligation debt to the city over the next 12 years if we do not act on this or do not pursue this agreement, versus what, based on existing numbers and existing performance of the proposed district, would be relatively or very close to debt neutral. Is that a fair characterization of the choices that we're facing?
Mayor, Councilmember Schmidt, that is a precise description.
Okay. Now, as to the rest of the process that's going, that as we continue on this deals with the draft version of the schedule that you've given us. In order for these star bonds to be issued, we have to have a series of public meetings. You have to bring that back to us. This body has to affirmatively act to issue new star bond debt. Is that correct?
Yes, the only thing I would say is they're actually public hearings. They're not, public meetings. I just don't want to confuse anybody.
Okay.
That they are actual hearings that are required by statute with notice provisions with them.
Okay. So I just wanted to clarify that what we're looking at right now is the first step in a process that is going to, by all measurable accounts, result in approximately just a little under $9 million in savings for city taxpayers over the next 9 years, or the next 12 years, as opposed to having to pay that money and risking the loss of a business that generates $160 million annually in projected economic development. So I just wanted to make sure we got through all of the numbers and those numbers got out in public and everybody understood where we're at. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Assume that everyone understands. Are there other questions to Mr. Sublette, Mrs. Heller?
Well, I've got another clarification just for us and for the public, and I'll try and be as concise as you were. It appears that in this combination of two agreements, we really have three different actions that the council's being asked to take, and council and others. One is to expand to expand the Star Bond district and get more revenue coming in. The second is to, one way or another, in this case, borrow money, but pay off all the debt that is owed on the track right now, or to largely do that. And then third, let's see, so the state enters with the Star Bonds, we pay off the debt, and then we also negotiate with Mr. Irwin that he gives up the reversionary clauses that are in the lease, in the agreement right now, so that we get the track back. So that we get it and can control it, and also because there actually is more land involved there, of which the track is just a part, and that gives us the entire parcel. Do I understand correctly? I think I do, that really for each one of those three pieces, we have to have the other two to make it work.
Yes, they're all contingent on one another.
For the state to be comfortable doing the Star Bonds, we need to have control of the land, and we need to have it debt-free, and similarly, it just works out. That, I just wanted to clarify that, in that I appreciate how you all worked with Mr. Irwin to get what seemed like an impossible situation to one where it could work out. Thank you.
Mrs. Del Isla?
Thank you, Mayor. City Manager, City Attorney, I commend you for your work. I really appreciate everything that you have done to get us to where we're at. I think that one of the number one questions that I have received from my constituents is what would occur if we do nothing? There is a lot of concern in the community with regards to this transaction and to the future of, the indebtedness that we are in the city. Now, that being said, just to make it even simpler, my question to you is, answering the public's question, if we do nothing, we would indebt ourselves. And this alternative, in fact, is a business decision that would assist us to neutralize the debt that we currently have today, making sure that our constituent dollars are safeguarded.
Mayor and Councilmember De La Isla, I'm going to butcher grammar and reason in my response. You don't even have to do nothing. We've already done it. We are already in that position.
Correct.
We've already obligated ourselves in 2005. We would if we were to assume that Mr. Irwin decides that he's going to continue to stay at Heartland Park, he's going to continue to operate, and he has the same level of results, and continues to operate the facility, and the economy continues to operate as if everything's okay today, we are looking at that $8+ million worth of debt that we were going to have to identify some other source of funds to come from. So doing nothing, you've already done it. It's happening now.
So therefore, again, taking this action assists our city to remain in a neutral financial position.
Correct. Often the risk, Mayor, Councilmember De La Isla, often the risk is in doing something and there's a risk. In this particular case, doing nothing brings the risk. There is, these are statements that are difficult to prove, but this is as close as you can come to a risk-free action because the taxes are already being paid by the people. It is simply a redistribution of existing revenue streams from the state to the city. And the structure that has been put forward by the Department of Commerce is totally to the city's benefit, which allows us to address the concerns that exist with the existing structure at Heartland Park and benefits Mr. Irwin and others.
Thank you.
Are there other questions or comments? Now, we are actually on item 5F, which is the agreement. We would entertain the public comment now, and then we have others who have signed up to speak on the next item, which is the memorandum of understanding. Mr. Sublette, would you want to just briefly say, since we're only now going to talk about the agreement for the agreement, what that is as opposed to the memorandum?
Yes, Mayor. The agreement, as we've referred to it as the workout agreement, would allow a loan to Jayhawk Racing for approximately $300,000 to continue operations until a possible star bonds would be issued and the district would be expanded in February of 2015. In exchange, Mr. Irwin and the city would agree to put a deed in lieu of foreclosure, and the city would have a redemption right. If Court First decided they wanted to foreclose, they would have to give written notice to the city, and the city would have 30 days to redeem that land. It's not something we have to do, but we have the option. So that, in essence, is the workout agreement, and is dependent on the memorandum, what's contained in the memorandum of understanding in terms of the star bonds being issued.
But the agreement itself is the initial process that we need to begin.
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, so we will go then to public comment, and we have 7 persons signed to speak. The first is John Frieden. Mr. Frieden?
Thank you, I think I'll pass.
Okay, thank you. All right. Raymond Irwin?
I'm going to be very brief. Just one quick comment to supplement what both these gentlemen have said, just to give a more rounded understanding of how star bonds work. The star bonds for our property was contained only on taxes created on the 700 acres of Heartland Park. Let's compare that to the Kansas City Speedway. When they built that, they had several hundred acres over there. And once the Speedway was built, then things like Nebraska Furniture Mart, the T-Bones, all the restaurants and so forth and so on were built into that area, all contained within their Star Bonds district. The point I make here is that, say during the NHRA National, I know you've all tried to go out and get a bite to eat during the NHRA National and probably had a difficulty getting in because the racers and or the people that are there to see it were crowding into the restaurants. God bless, that's what it's all about. The point being is that just because the island annexation of Heartland Park, Topeka, done way back in when, necessitated that star bonds be only on that property. There was no way to reach out and say, let's grab what happens on Wanamaker, let's grab what happens on Kansas Avenue. That is not legally possible to be done. So the current Secretary of Commerce said, look, he recognized, as these gentlemen do, what happens in the city of Topeka based on what our activities are at Heartland Park. Let's try and capture some area that's contiguous, and that makes it legal to do so, okay, and therefore take some of those taxes and apply it toward the star bonds payments and correcting the issues we have here now, even though we can't capture what happens on Wanamaker. And I want to make that clarification so that it was clear that it's not that we're not creating it, it's just that you can't capture it
Okay,
because of proximity.
thank you.
Questions on that?
Are there questions, Mr. Irwin? Seeing none?
Yes,
Thank you very much. Jack Woelfel. Welcome, Mr. Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, City Council members, I am Jack Waffle. I live at 3524 Southeast 25th Street. And even though there's several points that should be brought out about this agenda item, I'd only like to mention 2 of them. One of them is the additional sales tax money is going to be redirected, and the matter of having no legal recourse throughout this thing has not been mentioned yet. But redirecting the city's, or the sales tax revenues, whether it's city or if it's state, is a tax increase. Because things that are paid with that money right now will either have to raise more revenue in one way or another, a tax increase, or maybe whoever's responsible for that, the state apparently in this case, would have to furnish fewer services. All this to me becomes as what we've commonly phrased a government bailout, we're taking more and more of our tax dollar money, sales tax in this case, to bail out or pay the financial obligations of a company, whether it's big or whatever. And this one's a pretty good-sized company. Now, according to the agreement, if you go down to page 7, near the first, at the end of the first paragraph, it says that it addresses why this has come to the public before you as a council in such a sudden manner. This is the first that many, many people have heard of it. And I see on page 7, there is a due date, July the 1st. This is your last meeting before that. It has to be done tonight. So that's why I see the urgency. But one of the most disturbing parts of this that I see is on page 9. And beginning at the right-hand end of the second line, it states that the city, as well as others that are involved in this, do not have any legal claim or cause of action against the lender relating to this agreement. I would wonder why the city would not want to have legal recourse in case something in this event, in this agreement, would not happen as intended. It just sounds dangerous to me. I wrote to Mayor Wolgast about a comment that he made about the issue, and he in a paper, and I quote, said, "It is an excellent piece of property that has excellent possibilities for development." That's what he said. I wrote to him and asked him what specifically did he mean by that. Well, the Honorable Mayor did respond to my email, but he didn't touch on answering that question, so I still don't know. But in Sunday's paper, there was reference made to possibility generating what might be called a Legends District, if you're familiar with Kansas City. And it just makes me wonder, not knowing any more than I do about it, is this thing a proposal to let Heartland Park fail when the city takes over? So if this continues, are you ready to do, as a council, are you ready to do the same thing for a small engine repair shop down the street? What about the dress shop? When it gets into financial trouble, are you going to do this for them as well? The candy store? I sincerely doubt you'll do that, raise taxes or redistribute taxes for that. In this business, Heartland Park Raceway, is it considered too big to fail? Thank you very much. I do encourage a no vote on these items.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. The next person is Kurt Young.
Thank you. My name is Kurt Young. As most of you know, I have been involved with the lodging industry for quite a few years here in Topeka. And I want to take this opportunity to just encourage you, and number one, to thank everyone that's been involved in this effort to this point for the hard work that's gone into this. I know this is a complex problem, and it's going to take a complex solution to get to a resolution. But what I prefer to look at is we don't know what the future holds if we don't do this deal. One part of the future we do know. The city's going to have to stand up for $8.9 million in indebtedness. But the part that we don't know is what does the future hold for that park beyond that point, if it fails. We don't know. I can tell you that with some of the numbers that I've seen over the years in terms of sales tax revenue generated as a result of events that take place, not sales tax, but actual spending, actual revenue that takes place as a result of events that take place at Heartland Park, we would miss as much as the $8.9 million and probably more as a result of losing the facility. In addition to that, you have the transient guest tax fund that gets dramatically impacted by any loss of activity at Heartland Park. Over the years, Heartland Park has generated, and this is something that a lot of people probably don't know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 220 to 250 event days. That's activities, events actually taking place at Heartland Park on those facilities, and in turn generating spending within Topeka. So From a lodging industry standpoint, I don't think that's anything that should be taken lightly. And we've just completed, some of us in this room tonight, have just gone through about a 2 or 3 month process working on the branding of Topeka. And if you were at the meeting last Friday, where this was kind of unveiled, I really shudder to think of the hurdles that we'd have to overcome losing a Heartland Park as the asset that it is in the community, and having to accomplish what we have worked so hard to achieve in this branding effort over the last two months. And there's a couple of council members here this evening that have participated in that, and I commend you for your involvement in that. So I will wrap this up by telling you that the lodging industry has a long history of supporting Heartland Park. We've been, over the years, cooperated in helping utilize transient guest tax dollars to help the events there. And I would dearly hate to see any loss of that facility or any lapse in the use of that facility. So I would encourage you to vote for both of these proposals tonight.
Okay. All right, thank you. Questions? Thank you for your comments. Next is Todd Bunting.
Good evening, thank you. I'm Todd Bunting, native Kansan. I retired 3.5 years ago as the Adjutant General of Kansas. And that's where I got to know Ray Irwin and Nancy at Heartland Park. There were no stronger supporters of the National Guard then and today than Ray and Nancy at Heartland Park. We started with Military Appreciation Days, would turn into Armed Forces Day. It was a great event for us each year when we had roughly 2,500 people deployed to come back to Topeka, and we'd bring our cannons out. We didn't knock anybody's window out. We had a good time out there, but that was all done out of the good grace of Ray Irwin. And in my many travels around the world, when we would fly back in here on a military airplane, it was great joy to me to land and see Heartland Park's lights on at night as we approached and came into Topeka. A lot of the things that we did were a simple phone call to Ray, who would always tell us, how can I help you? And there's not that many people like that, so I consider him and Nancy to be a treasure of this community. People that are devoted to this community are going to stay even after the outcome of this hopeful sale. We started Ride for the Red there, numerous Wounded Warrior rides. All of our motorcycle safety training was helped out by Heartland Park and numerous other safety training for the military, and I thank him for that. I have been honored to serve for 32 years, and I traveled all over the world. I choose to live here. I choose to live in Shawnee County and in Topeka, Kansas. I think this community has a lot of energy, and I think it has some treasures. I think Lake Shawnee is a treasure. I live in Barryton out by Lake Shawnee, and I take full advantage of that. I think Heartland Park is a treasure. I think it's one of the things that puts us on the map. In my many travels all over the world, people would know about Kansas, and we all know the various things they say about Kansas, but a lot of people would talk to me and say, you got a track there. John Force set a record there. I've been to other tracks around the country in my capacity, and John Force and people like that talk about Heartland Park even when they're not here. They don't just shine us on here. He talks about us all over the place because this is a great track. Records are set here, and I believe that's something we should retain. I'm a troop. I'll speak on behalf of the troops. The troops love racing. They like everything that racing involves. It's noisy, it's fast, it's powerful. But you know what the troops really like? They like a place that had a program that's called Free with an ID. And Ray Irwin did that. So I'm here tonight to tell you that this is, and Ray and his wife are stalwarts of this community. And I can only hope that as we continue Heartland Park, you would find somebody close to that who would make that kind of engagement with the installations we have and the troops we have here. I know these are tough times. I lived through them in my 7 years as Adjutant General. And I know the trends in many things on revenue and everywhere else are down. I understand that. I appreciate each and every one of you taking a leadership role to take this city forward. And part of that leadership I know you will do is to reverse those trends and find a way, what seems to me from what I've seen, a good way forward to retain a national treasure and a local treasure of Heartland Park. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Terry Cook. Okay, all right, thank you. The next speaker is Joseph Ledbetter.
Evening, governing body. I do have some concerns about this agreement. I want to put them on the record. But in no way am I opposed to this Heartland Park. It's been out there for a number of years. I live close by it. It's a good facility. And I choose to live here too. I know that really makes a lot of people happy, and I'm glad to help make them happy. And in fact, I was born at Forbes Air Base. Not that you really care, but thought I'd tell you that. This agreement, I guess the first part that struck me was the splash in the news. And you all know me well enough now. I like to see a lot of transparency in government and government money. I don't like surprises, especially when they're named Go Topeka. And I don't like this because it talks about you had a deal effective April 25th of 2014 at the top of the working agreement. And then on page 7, it was already mentioned, you're talking about you have to approve this by July 1 to make this happen. July 1 of 2014. You have to pass a resolution of intent to expand the Starbond District and amend the district plan, and all the requiring mailings and publication notice of public hearing shall have been or should have been started. Interjecting a word there. That concerns me because I've seen what I believe is transparency in this government for the last several years, usually. And when I turn in core requests, I get usually prompt answers. And so I base this on experience, but I don't like this. I don't like these surprises. I don't know why this hasn't been talked about. Now, I've been inquiring of city employees, and I've got some emails that go back several years saying, what's going on with the star bonds at the raceway? Are they being repaid? So I'm not blaming the present management. I went back and looked at JADO minutes, which are now online. You can check that out yourself. In August of 25 of 2004, we had Go Topeka pushing. We need to do these $10 million of star bonds. This is going to be a great deal. Maybe it was, but was it thought through? Is tonight's projections, are your projections well thought through? We've lost a lot of jobs in this town in the last 4 years. Oh, I know nobody wants to talk about it, but it's true. And so how many more are we going to lose in the next few years? And are these projections going to be accurate to repay these bonds? I'm not saying you shouldn't do this. I'm saying I don't like the suddenness of it. I don't like the fact that the public hasn't been engaged because I'm not afraid of the public. And I don't know why we have that fear in this community. When I deal with JADO, when I deal with different bodies, why there's such a fear of the public? Why not talk to the public? You know, we might agree with you, we might not. We might have a better idea. We might tweak this a little bit, but why not talk to us instead of the suddenness? And that's what I am concerned about. Is this going to be the new modus operandi of the city government of Topeka? We're going to do these suddenlies. We're going to spring these kind of things on the public like we do with Go Topeka. Oh, we got to have this land. We got to have this land. There's no appraisals. There's no discussion. Public, shut up. Don't talk. So I'm going to ask for an extension.
Mr. Brown? For 2 minutes?
2 minutes, that's good.
For 2 minutes, there a second? Mr. Leesla seconds. All those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no.
We have 8 yes.
8 having voted yes, please continue for 2 minutes.
Thank you. When you're doing something like this, you've got to also look at the end result. Who's going to run this thing? Is this going to be a new department of the city of Topeka? I'm opposed to that also. Originally, when the bonds were voted on back in the 80s, I did a little research. The discussion was let somebody else run it. The public put up, I think, about $8 million of bonds at that time to help build the Heartland Park. But Lario Enterprise put in a lot of their own money and then ran it for a number of years. And I think it was successful, at least for a while. And so based on, and I'm not talking about this current administration, but based on what I've seen over the last few years of, it took about 9 years to fix the zoo, and it took about 6 years for us to finally start fixing the potholes. We went through those periods. I'm not real impressed that we would take on a new obligation of running a racetrack. So I think all that needs to be talked about and fleshed out, and those are my concerns. I understand you're in a tough situation. I get that. But I think we should have had this discussion a long time ago, and maybe we could have had some solutions with the public. And I really wish in the future, when Go Topeka and all these other people come in and hype something, we might have a real vetting and discussion of actual facts and see if it would actually work before we just jump off and buy off on this or buy off on that. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Council members, that completes the public comment. We have before us the agreement, item 5F. What is your pleasure? Mr. Schmidt?
I'll move to approve.
The motion has been made to approve the agreement. Mr. Harmon seconds. Is there discussion? Mr. Schmidt?
I just had a couple things that I wanted to say in response to the public comments. I guess I'll start with the last comment. Joe, I'm glad you choose to live here too, for one. And I wanted to comment on the comments that you made on the projections that were made in 2005 regarding the STAR bonds. Obviously, those projections were wrong, and that's why we are facing close to a $9 million payment due out of public funds. I agree that there were mistakes made in the past. I would be very hesitant to compare the projections, the numbers that have been introduced today or in the last week or so, with those numbers. The numbers that we're introducing now are based on revenues that have been collected, as opposed to projections of what an area will collect in the future. While that does not eliminate risk, it very much so reduces risk and makes this a much less risky proposition than what was faced in 2005. And I am not exempting 2005 from any fault, the actions that were taken there, but this is a much less risky projection than it was at that time. Further, I agree with you that this needs to be a public process. I've spoken with a lot of people over the last several days and week about this process, and I think it's very important that we understand that we are not passing STAR bonds tonight. We are not passing anything that is a long-term commitment. We are passing a memorandum of understanding and a working agreement about the path that we're going to direct city staff to pursue. There will be public hearings, public protests, many more meetings, and many more approvals in the process. This is the first step in that process, and this is a public process. It will be a public process. I understand that sometimes the timing may be not what everybody wants. The situation is not what everybody wants. This is the timing that we have been dealt, and I fully intend to be as open and public about this as we possibly can be moving forward, and I think that's the intention of everybody involved. And I will do my best to hold everybody to that as we move forward. But this is the first step. This is not any final action tonight, and I think that really needs to be emphasized. And with that, I am going to vote in favor of this adoption.
Okay. Are there other comments? Mrs. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I appreciate the comments of my colleague, because I want to make sure everybody understands this process as well. There will be public hearings, as been stated, and this is a first step. And we are in a hard position, and while I wish we weren't in this position, when faced with a choice of potentially $9 million in debt, which the taxpayers of this city would inherit, or we already have, or breaking even, it seems to me going forward with this process is the best option that we have. I mean, $9 million, that's 9 mills. And the fact, comments were made about, well, but we're getting the tax dollars from the state. Well, star bond districts are utilized throughout, the state, and in some places, much larger districts, as pointed out, have been drawn. And I think Topeka is somewhat unique in the fact that we have so many state-owned buildings that we don't collect tax on. The fact that the state is willing to extend this and do this at this point in time, I don't see that as a bailout in any way. I see that as something that needs to happen for the citizens of the capital city. So I am going to support this.
Thank you. Are there other comments? Mrs. Hiller?
My question would be to ask the city manager or the city attorney to elaborate. We all got handed a calendar today for basically the public hearings and notice periods that have been discussed here. And it does stretch all the way until February 2015. Some of that is because of waiting periods to set dates and then give public notice before you can have a meeting. Some of that, I'm sure, is driven a little bit by the fact that we're not having meetings every week anymore, and so you've got to wait until we've got a meeting date. I wanted to ask the city manager to let people know where they could have a look at this calendar and discuss for a moment whether these dates, how close these are to being locked in stone.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Hiller. So as we have been doing on several larger projects, we are going to set up a web presence for this. We will put documents associated with this on the web. We want to identify very early on what is the projected calendar so that people can understand what it is that we're going to do, when we're going to do it, how we're going to do it, and we'll earn maybe the positive score back from Councilor Ledbetter in terms of we have been open and we try to continue to be open, and people may agree or not agree with this, but I think this is the process you roll out with an MOU and then you go forward. So we'll get all of that available so people can look at it and be well informed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have before us the motion to approve the agreement. All those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no.
We have 7 yes, Ms. Ortiz voting no.
7 having voted yes, the agreement with Jayhawk Racing is approved. We'll proceed to agenda item 5G, the Memorandum of Understanding.
G is approval of a memorandum of understanding between the City of Topeka, Kansas, a municipal corporation of Shawnee County, Kansas, Visit Topeka Incorporated, Jayhawk Racing Properties LLC, and the Kansas Department of Commerce.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we had discussed previously, the presentation included both this item and that item. We're certainly available to answer any questions that may be posed. Otherwise, we proceed,
Okay.
we recommend just proceeding.
Are there questions from the council on this item? Seeing none, we will then proceed with the public comment. We have 4 persons who signed up to speak. The first is John Frieden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll pass.
Thank you. Mr. Irwin.
Again, I'll be very brief. I just want to bring one thing to everyone's attention that we're concerned about employment, of course. Everyone is in the city and every part of the country. Between employment, outside services, companies that do work for us, as well as the prize money paid out, which goes out on a 1099, which in its own form is an employment, our numbers generally exceed between $900,000 and $1 million a year. It comes off of our operations, and that's important to our economy. It's important to our employment, and it's certainly important to our citizens in our area. I want to bring that forth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next person is Jack Woelfel.
Thank you again, once again, Your Honor. Again, I'll state it for the record because I think you probably watch these tapes. My name is Jack Woelfel. I live at 3524 Southeast 25th Street. And now, the second agenda item to me seems like pretty much a moot point. Because I don't know what you do with one without the other, but here we are. But it does bring to mind one or two things that about this memorandum of understanding. One is if you'll look at items number 12 and 13 on page 4, it does the same thing as I referenced in the workout agreement, in that it relinquishes any legal recourse. If something doesn't work out as intended, you're out there just hanging out there. Maybe that's how we got into this situation before. I don't know that. But it seems, again, a very dangerous way to do business. The other thing is, I had the opportunity to exchange emails with, I exchanged emails with several of you. Several of you didn't respond, but ones that did, I had a series of questions. I asked my council member, and this is pertinent to this issue too, personally, what is a core issue? Is this a core issue of the function of government? I could read that question specifically. I've got it here with me, but I asked, what is the core? Is the entertainment business a core issue for our city government? The council member responded, quote, I do not personally believe that entertainment venue, i.e. Heartland Park, is one of the core functions of local government. She went on to say, my intention is to not incur any more debt to save the taxpayers from more expense. I don't understand a 8-0 vote after a comment like that. But I wanted you to know there is one council member up here that does not believe that the entertainment business is a core function of our city government. And I'm like that too. I don't think so. Thank you again, Your Honor, and the council members for your time.
Thank you for your comments. The next person to speak is Joseph Ledbetter.
I placed most of my concerns on the earlier comments on the agreement, but I am going to put into the record a copy of these minutes from August 24th or 25th of 2004. And I'm reading from this JADO meeting. Mr. Kinziger acknowledged that City Councilman Clark Duffy had suggested they might get better educated about star bonds. And I thought that was interesting because I'm not sure they did. And the point I'm making is watch how you get in these situations. There's lessons to learn. And we can talk about jobs, we can talk about this concern and that concern, but if it's just hype, and I'm not saying this was, but I've seen it too many times in this community. We hype something up. We say, oh, this is going to bring business, this is going to do this is going to do that. And it doesn't. And I look at stats. I look at real facts from the U.S. Census, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that talks about the decline of jobs in this community, and it's continuing. So when I talk about projected income, I'm not talking about today. I'm talking about, are you sure that income is going to be there 2 years from now? Are you sure that income is going to be there 10 years from now? Will we lose some more plants? Will we lose some more state jobs? Because we've lost a lot of state jobs in the last 2 years, over 2,000 since '09, excuse me. So I do appreciate that this is a tough situation. I understand it. I want to make sure that we're not opening up yet a new department called the City Department of Raceways. And I also want to make sure that we have a lot of transparency. We've been assured we're going to in this process, and a lot of public input. But I'm not afraid of public input. I think the public is right a lot more often than you think if you'll give them a chance to speak and actually talk to them and listen. There's a lot of wise people live in this community, but very often they're shut off and told they're not important. We don't need your ideas. We've already got somebody with that idea. And then we find out they're gonna put up windmills at Forbes Field and pay themselves $406,000 a year. How ridiculous. Okay, I'm gonna put this in the record. Thank you. And here's an extra copy if anybody wants to look at it. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments, council members. That completes the public comments. We have before us the memorandum of understanding. What is your pleasure?
Move to approve.
Mr. Schmidt moves to approve. Mr. Brown seconds. Is there discussion? Deputy Mayor.
I just want to, again, say I'm supporting this, and Mr. Wolfel, since everybody knows you were talking about me as your council person, you didn't read the rest of the answer. When I said I didn't think this was a core function, I also went on to say, but I had nothing to do with the fact that the city entered into this agreement back in 1988 or 2005. So I'm faced with making a decision today on what's going to be the best alternative for the city. And again, $9 million in debt, or possibly $10 million of trying to pay off in debt versus a break even, seems like this is the approach to take. So that's why I am voting the way I am today. And again, as has been explained several times, this is only a first step. There will be public hearings. We haven't issued any star bonds. We haven't done anything by this vote today. We are just saying we need to explore a way out of this so that the city doesn't have to pick up $9 million in debt. And so that's why I'm voting yes.
Thank you. Are there other comments, Mrs. Hiller?
Again, if the city manager could explain, one of our speakers did mention that the public has been wondering if we were going to get into the business of running a racetrack, and the city manager could just briefly address what our thoughts are about where we go once we get this resolved.
Mayor, Councilmember Hiller, the plan is preferably to sell the facility to an operator who is able to come in and operate it as an independent business. The next step would be to identify a qualified operator who would run it under a management use and lease agreement. Under no circumstances are we planning on operating it ourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other comments? Seeing none, we have before us then the memorandum of understanding. All those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no.
We have 7 yes, Ms. Ortiz voting no.
7 having voted in favor of the memorandum of understanding is approved.